The one big problem that I see in the longevity industry right now is that so many companies, telemedicine companies, diagnostic companies, supplement companies are trying to bypass the medical practitioner and go directly to the patient, and it's dangerous.
Where are we headed?
The days of waiting for something to happen or waiting for some dysfunction to happen to intervene are over. With the technology, with the diagnostics, with the things that we have now, we can identify the smallest little biological shift into dysfunction. If I can be healthy, if I can talk about all the right things, if I can be a good example of starting successful businesses and having good relationships, that I can prepare my daughters for the future and I could be a good example for them. And that for me was like what I wanted to do in life.
Leonard Pastrana, welcome to the Pathway to Peak Performance. You are a doctor of pharmacy, and wow, you are a peak performer, my friend. It is great to have you in all the way from West Palm Beach, Florida. That's a trip. You definitely put the miles in to get out here for this one.
Yeah, I'm getting those Delta points for sure.
Excellent.
I think I increased my status just on this trip alone. I don't think you could take a farther trip across the country than, South Florida to San Francisco. Is almost as far as it can get.
Yeah, I guess the only thing you could do is go to like Seattle or Anchorage, Alaska.
That's about it.
Yeah. Well, it's so great to have you in. We have a lot to cover, a lot to talk about. But first things first, what's your charity?
St. Jude's. Yeah, it's special to us. My wife had a sister that passed away early on, and I just couldn't imagine a better charity to the impact that they make in people's lives when when it really matters, when it really counts.
Yeah, that's a shared charity for years, and I think really believe in it. Matter of fact, I'm on the board of the USS Potomac, and the USS Potomac was actually gifted by Elvis to Danny Thomas and St. Jude's way back in the day.
Oh, wow.
Then they figured out that they didn't want that. They didn't want the actual Potomac, which is a crazy story, but phenomenal organization and does just so many great things for so many people. So yeah, that's fantastic. So all of the proceeds, the profits from the views that we get, we'll go to that. We're also going to link St. Jude's in the show notes so that anyone can go there and just learn why their mission. So it'll link to their mission page and donation page, and it helps them to gain, which they definitely need as much help as they can.
That's great. That's great.
Okay, so we always start with the origin story. Let's talk about you. Let's go all the way back to try to understand where did you come from and how do we get to this place where you've achieved such a pathway to, well, what I say is such a peak performance position, but let's talk about the pathway and how you got there.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. How far back do we want to go?
Let's go all the way back. Yeah. Tell us about what it was like to be a kid.
I actually grew up in Miami. I was actually born in Oklahoma. My dad was in the Army, and I was born in a hospital base. And Dad was in the Army, and then we went to Germany for a year, and then we went to Miami, which is basically where I grew up. And then later on we moved to West Palm Beach. I'm Cuban. My mom was born in Cuba. My grandmother was born in Cuba. Grandfather was born in Cuba. And so, not surprising that I'm Cuban from Miami in South Florida. But I think that had a big impact early on, just because I saw, what my family went through to kind of get here and how much they struggled. And so I didn't realize it till later on in life, your success really depends on how much stress you can handle. And I never felt like I had much stress just because I know the history of like my grandmother and my mom and what they went through coming over here. And so it was, I didn't know that when I was early on, but I realized later on that was kind of like a driving force, a strength that I had, just watching them go from nothing, having to come here and start all over, and just working so hard. I just thought it was normal. I thought, everybody's mom like works 2 and 3 jobs, everybody's grandmother works 15 hours. And so I didn't realize it till later on in life that that kind of stuck with me. And so I grew up in a great family with a lot of love, and but I did have a little bit of ADD, so it was hard for me to focus. So school was kind of difficult, and barely kind of get by. And it wasn't until it was time to make a decision to what I wanted to do with my life is where I realized I wasn't. I played a lot of sports early on. I realized I wasn't going to play sports anymore, or that wasn't going to be a professional career for me. But I remember looking at the prerequisites for pharmacy school and thought, hey, this is something really interesting. This is something really difficult to do, to try to achieve. And so I had that like sports mentality around it, just because it was something that was hard. And then I went to pharmacy school in West Palm Beach at Palm Beach Atlantic University, and that was a great experience. I feel like I got lucky in that I did it just because I thought, hey, this is a nice income. This is something difficult that I can achieve. Um, Medicine is interesting to me, but I just got lucky in that I really fell in love with it. I really fell in love with it early on, and I graduated pharmacy school, and I went to work for like a retail pharmacy, the big chains. And I realized pretty quickly that, you have this goal. It's like, you got to get your doctorate degree, and there's a lot of work that goes into it. And you think if I just hit this one goal, then I'll have made it. I have a six-figure salary, and then I can go on and do the right thing and live my life. And then I quickly realized that I really didn't like being a pharmacist for a long time. Just working in the retail setting, filling prescriptions as fast as you can. There was no growth to it. You have a certain salary. You can maybe get a 5% raise every year, but that's it. I was like, well, so this is the rest of my life. 20 years, 30 years. So this is just what I do. There's no thing to chase, because I was always chasing something. I was always trying to get into pharmacy school. I was trying to, graduate from pharmacy school, and then all of a sudden, I hit that, and I just felt like almost dead inside. And I also felt very fooled when I was in school, because it was exciting. You learn so much. You got so prepared to go out there and make such a big difference, and then you get out into the workforce, into traditional medicine, and you realize that it's kind of a joke. It's like this misincentivized system. I was just filling prescriptions as fast as I can. I was watching people not get any better, just, giving them Band-Aids, just, like pumping out medication as fast as you can, giving Band-Aids as fast as you can. And no one was really getting better, and everybody was misincentivized. Later on, I worked in the hospital, but I remember going into these meetings where they were going over their protocols, and I was just shocked that they were going over like what the protocol was going to be for a certain antibiotic, and the conversation wasn't on what worked best; it was on what's the cheapest for the hospital. And so they'd be going over the guidelines, and this would be, hey, this is the third line. We just reviewed all this literature. This is the third line therapy, but they're making it the protocol of the hospital based on cost. And that blew my mind, because when you're in school, you're learning, what is the first line therapy? What do we have the most amount of evidence for? And that's what you learn. That's what you get tested on. But when you get out into the real world, it's shocking what medicine was really like. And at the same time, I was getting very unhealthy. I decided, I needed to leave retail pharmacy. I wanted to do something I wanted to start my own business, but I realized I needed more experience. And that's when I started working in the hospital. And I just remember, looking at the screen. When you have a computer screen, you're sitting there in the basement as a pharmacist, and you're verifying prescriptions. I remember counting one day, there's about 17 lines for prescriptions, right, per page. And then you click and you see the next page. And I remember that you'd always see a patient per entire page. Like one patient would take an entire page. They'd be admitted to the hospital, and these are all the medications that they're taking. It'd be about 17 medications, even more. And I'd look at the age of some of these patients, and they weren't so far away from me. And I realized this is the consequence of where I was at before. I was in retail pharmacy, just pumping drugs to people. Yeah, take another drug, see another doctor. And now I'm seeing the consequences of what happens to them in the hospital. They have a heart attack. They have something else that's going on. They need help right away. And now the story is so jumbled because they're taking so many different medications, which, are necessary. I'm a pharmacist. I believe in medication. But I started to get really unhealthy myself. I started to gain a lot of weight. And I remember leaving the hospital one day, and I'm talking to my wife because I'm working the night shift, and I'm walking up the stairs, and I'm so out of breath that I'm like, hey, give me a second, because I was trying to have a conversation with her, but I couldn't even breathe. And I was like, let me call you back when I get in the car. And I remember sitting in the car and thinking, like, I'm going to be one of those people on the screen with the 17 different prescriptions going on. Nobody around me was all that healthy. And that's when I started kind of just being kind of disgusted with healthcare and saying, I don't even want to do this. I don't want to be a part of it anymore. And I started to look to other inspiring people. I found people that were doing great things, like entrepreneurs, other people that were doing exciting things in the world. And I started following them, and I started getting health advice, from them, because And I changed my life around. I started learning about things like intermittent fasting and the importance of nutrition and the importance of exercise, which I inherently already knew those things, but it wasn't part of the identity. It wasn't part of the lifestyle within medicine. You don't walk around through a hospital or through a pharmacy with, a lot of healthy physicians walking down the hallway. The physicians themselves look just like the rest of society and are getting as sick, if not sicker, due to the stress that they're dealing with as society. I actually, found this other world. And I said, I don't want to even be part of traditional medicine anymore. Let me start a business. Let me learn marketing. Let me learn something else. I'm getting my real estate license. I'm trying different businesses. I'm doing a bunch of other things because I felt almost dead inside when I was doing that. There was no growth. It was a dead end. And as I'm doing that, as I'm looking at entrepreneurs, as I'm looking at these other people, I'm realizing I want to start my own business. I want to have some financial freedom. I realized that these entrepreneurs, one of the these successful people, one of the main things that they're talking about is how much stock they put into their own health, into their own performance, how healthy they are, how much exercise, how they keep their stress level down, how they sleep better. And that's when I started realizing, hey, if I want to invest in my future and my family's future, I got to take myself much more serious. And that's when I started getting into, this world of health and wellness. And so I said, I don't want to do this health type of healthcare thing anymore. I knew a lot about healthcare, and I started my first business was around prescription discount cards. And I realized, like kind of like GoodRx and those things, I realized that not only would you have this messed up healthcare system, but they were just stealing from patients. Medications that were costing like $110. I knew those things were like $2.
Yeah, well, I just take a beat here. Just one thing I just want to say is like, when you're in the traditional pharmacy world, and you take a look at like how the PBMs really like, you come in, the minute you tell anybody you got insurance, they got the gag order on you. And now they're just taking, it's like the payer who controls the PBM now, they bought them all up, right? Now it's just like this money is just going right back into your insurance. They're double dipping on you. And if you just went in and said, I don't have insurance, it's like night and day.
Well, this happened to like plenty of times in the pharmacy. Someone comes in, and I'm not going to name which insurance company, but someone come in and said, hey, run my insurance. It's like, oh, you have a $25 copay. But then I run the cash price and it's like $13. And it's like this person now has to pay a bigger copay through their insurance because they're using their insurance.
And Leonard, most impactful on the people that are older, right? On a fixed income, these types of things are, I guess you would know so much more about that than I would, but I just think that there's a CVS here and the pharmacy is totally overloaded.
Yeah.
They're not, the customer service is terrible.
Yeah.
And I think this is one of the things that's definitely going to happen here. We'll see. And I really want to ask you about this for just the traditional, as we go back and talk about that before we move forward to the things you're doing today. But the traditional pharmacy model, so ripe for, and we've seen dispensary type, things before, where, it's like, it's just, you put the order in and it pops out the drug. But now you can see those big chains like AI and robotics set to just totally disrupt the entire, like if any company, CVS, Walgreens, whatever.
Well, we see what's happening to them. They're going, they're closing stores, they're firing pharmacists, they're getting rid of their workforce. Like they're what you're talking about is happening. If you look at their stock price, you look at the locations that they're closing, you look at what Amazon's doing, they're getting taken over.
Yeah, you think about it. Amazon, why wouldn't you, if you knew that you were going to have a medication that you were regularly on, why wouldn't you just have it delivered to your house just through Prime?
Yeah, they didn't evolve, and it's a completely different subject. For the role of pharmacist in the healthcare system is evolving, and it's evolving fast, and it's I believe it's exciting. But I am scared for the profession because it does seem that there's going to be a lot of automation taking over their traditional role.
It's crazy. So just going back to when I was a kid, right over here, there's what was, the boardwalk. It was kind of like the, shopping center. And there was a Crane pharmacy, and it was Crane.
Yeah.
It was the pharmacist. And the doctor would say, oh, you should take this thing. And then Crane would say, no. Then that's not what you want.
Yeah.
You want this.
Right.
Right. And you literally, that's what you'd get.
Yeah. That was the relationship that you had, with the pharmacist. It was the pharmacist was the most accessible healthcare professional that you can have. You don't have to wait in line. You don't have to wait three months to talk to them. You don't, they're not trying to rush you out the door. At least they weren't before. You'd go and you have a great conversation with your pharmacist and that you trusted. But that changed, like these big retail chains, the reason that you walk into a pharmacy right now and you're saying the customer service is bad, everybody seems, if you walk into any type of big retail chain, you look into the pharmacist's eyes, and that's the way I was. It looks like their soul's been sucked out of them.
Yeah,
because they're dead. They come out of school excited to do something special, and they're just metrics. They have a computer screen. It's like, hey, this is red. Hey, get this out the door. They're getting tracked on how fast you're getting things out the door, and they're constantly getting phone calls about send this technician home, send that technician home. They're trying to squeeze them as much as they can to pump out as much prescriptions as they can with the least amount of help. And so then you come in for a question, they're dead inside. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they don't have the energy.
They don't even have the energy to stop what they're doing and do what they do best, which is, talking to the patient, which is counseling the patient, which is making all the right recommendations, because they're in a system and they want to. Pharmacists inherently are great at working. They work so freaking hard. They care so much as a whole, as a profession. They want to be sitting there spending time with you, but their job depends on how fast they can get it through and how they can do it with as little help as possible. And so that's where I was like, this is kind of like a dead end. I need to kind of get out of here. There's been an evolution of all of medicine, and we're going through this really big evolution of medicine right now. I call it the evolution. I don't think medicine's changing. I don't think, let's say, longevity medicine is something different. I think it's just the evolution of traditional medicine. Traditional medicine was based on, it's evidence-based, it's based on guidelines, it's based on what is the best thing that we can do for the population as a whole, which is absolutely necessary and very important. Every physician should know that inside and out. But this evolution of medicine is now, okay, I have that. That's my foundation. I know all of that. I know that inside and out. But now I'm dealing with a person in front of me. How do I take what I know there, all the tools that I know, and how do I personalize this treatment for this one individual? Not for what this drug does as a whole in this population. I know more now about this patient when it comes to the diagnostics, when it comes to, having the time to sit and talk to them than ever before. We can identify risk earlier and earlier than we have ever before. So medicine has to change. And that's what's happening right now. And that's why you see this big distrust or exodus, even because I work primarily with medical practitioners, right? And I get calls every single day. ER doctors, pediatricians, internal medicine doctors, they want to get out of that system and they want to start practicing longevity medicine. That doesn't mean that they're turning their back on what they were traditionally trained at. They're just saying, hey, I can do much more for people earlier on, and I want to go live in that world. I don't want an insurance company telling me and dictating what I can give my patient. I don't want a hospital system or a formulary telling me what I should be able to give my patient. I want to provide such great care that I need to leave this insurance model and go to a cash-based model because my care is so good that someone is willing to pay me for that. And it's incentivized the right way. Your patients are only going to go to you if you make a change in their life and you're continuing to make a change in their life.
Yeah.
So your incentives are aligned.
I think that's one of the things that's so exciting about what you guys are doing, helping people to understand. You got to establish a baseline and understand what you're dealing with. And then it's really about, we had Ophir Klein on the show, and we're talking about pediatric medicine and how so many of the illnesses that you see that appear in adulthood have their origins in children, in pediatrics. So the notion of getting out ahead of and being preventive. I remember when I first got into healthcare, all those years ago, I was like, I don't get it. I literally, that's how naive I was. I didn't get it. Why people, they called it alternative stuff back in those days. I didn't understand why wouldn't an insurance company want to pay to keep you well rather than having you, when we wind up in this last 10 years of life, palliative healthcare, where it's the biggest expense to the entire system exists in that particular period of time. But what I didn't realize was, hey, there's these big players, and they just kick the can down the road because they know that insurance is tied to your employer. And it's just, this game of like, hey, how can I dodge this particular procedure and put it off until it gets to the next guy?
Yeah. Right? Well, there's no incentive to keep you healthy early on in your life before disease hits because they don't know that you're going to be insured by them later.
Right.
They're like, hey, we can give you medications. We can kick you along the road for a while, and we'll take the risk that maybe you're not with us. You're with somebody else at the end. So there's no incentive from an insurance company to keep you healthier earlier on in life, because we do have great medications that keep people somewhat together, maintaining disease, so that the incentives are misaligned. And so that's where I find that this new evolution of medicine, where it's like these medical practitioners are providing so much value that someone's willing to say, hey, I think this is worth me investing in. And it only works if they get outcomes for that patient continuously.
Look, and let's face it, right? There's lots of things to invest into, but the best investment you could ever possibly make is in your health. And for so many years, I mean, a lot of us, just have made tons of sacrifices around health in order to like achieve success, right?
Yeah.
So you're not going to sleep the amount of sleep time that you need in order to do that. But really, if you think about it, as you get older, the investment that you make in your health is so important. And if you can get people to understand that from the very beginning, we've gone through this incredible period of time where it's like kids aren't going outside, they're playing video games, right? Whereas when we grew up, and I think you're younger than I am for sure, but the idea was, man, I was out.
Yeah, just get on your bike and go.
Man, like, it was like free range, do whatever you
Get
want,
on your
right?
bike and go.
Okay, so, man, we've covered a lot of ground already.
Yeah.
Look, where's the future? So we've kind of touched on it now. Where are we headed? Where in the mind of Leonard Pastrana, you are so plugged in to into this entire field, really a true pioneer. You and Frank are like really on it. You've built a phenomenal organization. Where are we headed? What do people do in order to break the chains of the traditional sick care model, get to where they need to go in order to actually achieve the right outcomes?
Well, I think we're going to get better and better at personalization. When it comes to, I call it clinical longevity medicine because I'm working primarily with doctors in the clinical application of longevity medicine. What we're constantly talking about with our medical practitioners is that, hey, we want to become better and better at assessing risk earlier and earlier. The days of waiting for something to happen or waiting for some dysfunction to happen to intervene are over. With the technology, with the diagnostics, with the things that we have now, we can identify the smallest little biological shift into dysfunction. And when we can identify it earlier and earlier, now we can intervene earlier and earlier. And so what I think the future is going to be about just having a better understanding of your own body, your own family history, your own genomics, how your body is operating. What is the one priority thing that you need to work on that's going to move the needle for you the most? And I think that it's going to be a lot of, not AI by itself, but there's going to be a lot of understanding of data, your own personalized data, and working specifically, not just with AI and somebody that's got the experience, that's got the medical knowledge to be able to interpret what's going on with you and help you find those solutions. And so I think that that really is the future, is that we're just going to understand ourselves better than we've ever had before. And we're going to know exactly what we need to do to achieve the things that we want to achieve when it comes to peak performance, which is what you're constantly talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's really interesting. So we're all N of one. And that notion that, and you would know this better than anybody, some people just have a total reaction to medications that, like, okay, well, these are sort of like in all the clinical studies, we know that there's a certain percentage of patients that have this particular type of reaction. So those are the warnings. But then there's some people that have this totally, crazy reaction to something. The idea is like eventually to sort of just get into that, genetic testing to really understand, okay, what is that going to explode? Is that going to be big?
Well, I think so. It's been around for a while and it's getting more and more popular. I know that, one of the things that I do is we have a yearly event called CALM, the Clinical Application of Longevity Medicine, where we bring all the best medical providers that are doing this every day. And a lot of the lectures, a lot of the talks that we have are around genomics, around how to personalize treatment, how to identify risk very early. It's not necessarily changing any of the fundamental things that we're doing. It's just that we don't have to guess as much as we did before. You can really personalize treatment for somebody. And so I think it's going to play a really big role, but I think the main point here is that it's going to be very individualized for that person. And that's the big difference between the old school of medicine, which was traditional, which is like, hey, what's the one decision that we can make that's going to help the entire, this generalized population is going to move the needle for them, where we're moving to, hey, what is happening with you? What is your family history? What do we see in your genomics? What type of biological shifts are happening for you individually? And that's going to dictate in which direction we go. And this is where I think like AI and technology kind of get it wrong, where there's so many companies that are trying to bypass the medical practitioner and say, hey, go do this blood work, and we're going to use our AI algorithm to give you solutions, and here's a 45-page handout for you to read. And it looks cool. You're reading it. It's like, wow, you're telling me all this stuff about me. But I know, and a lot of medical practitioners know, that on those 43 pages, there's about 3 pages that we know are super accurate. And the other ones are, hey, this is interesting to know, but we don't know if this is correct or not yet. They just want to impress you with this sheet, and that's why I think that there's a lot to know. There's a lot to question. We have to ask a lot of good questions. There's a lot to challenge, and that's why I like bringing in just the smartest people in the world, the best companies in the world, to say, hey, let's talk about this. What is the one thing that's going to move the needle the most for patients? Because, as we get better and better at these things, what I'm hoping is that the supplements, the peptides, the hormones, these things don't even become a cost anymore. It's almost like the cost to produce is what the patient's actually getting it for. Where the true value comes in is that expertise of the medical practitioner to say, okay, here is all this data. Let me tell you what this really means for you personally and what you can do about it. I think that's where the future is going to go.
Man, that is so exciting, right?
Yeah.
I mean, imagine that world. Imagine what can happen in that world. We see with the GLP-1s, like there's way more, obviously trying to control diabetes or, things through that originally, I guess. Weight loss is the next thing. But then finding out all these different things that, that those do for you.
Yeah, I think that's a great example, because like GLP-1s are like $1,000, right? If you want to get it, insurances aren't necessarily covering it. Then you have compounding pharmacies that are making it somewhat more accessible. And now you have Trump RX and the government making a deal with these companies to provide them at a cheaper cost. I think that's just going to continue to go lower and lower. I think eventually it's not an access thing, having access to it. And that's what I'm kind of excited about. And that's what I'm kind of constantly preaching to medical practitioners is, don't be the place someone goes to just get a peptide or get a hormone or get something from you. Like, that's not your true value. The true value is, what do you add to that GLP-1? Because what you're getting to is, hey, GLP-1s have all these benefits when it comes to Alzheimer's and osteoarthritis and cognitive function, all these other things that we're seeing when it comes to cardiovascular disease. Well, the question isn't, should we use a GLP-1 or not? It's like, yeah, we understand how beneficial it is. It's GLP-1 and what? It's like GLP-1 and like what type of nutrition is best for you? What type of exercise is best for you? Is resistance training better for you? Is zone 2 training better for you? Well, it depends on what we're working on. What are the other complementary peptides or supplements that will work in synergy with that GLP-1? That's the value that the medical practitioner brings to the table. And that's going to be the bigger question, is how do we put all these things together? Because we're very segmented in this world of medicine. Everybody's got their own diagnostic. Everybody's got their own EHR. Everybody's got their new AI technology. Everybody's trying to create their own thing. But what I'm waiting to see is who's going to kind of bring that all together. And I think that I can play a small role in that, in at least bringing the best minds together to ask the right questions, to talk about it.
One of the funniest things always in the process of doing this show, which is relatively new, right?
Yeah.
But is the guys that are really making the big moves are always super humble. Oh, maybe I could play a small role with this. Right? It's hilarious. That's hilarious to me. You're making a huge move. You're doing some incredible things, and you're placing pharmacists back into a position to really help inform doctors the right way. And I think your leadership in the industry is phenomenal.
Thank you.
Everyone says such great things about you.
Thanks.
That's one of the things that's really cool when you ever meet somebody where it's just like, hey, this guy has just an incredible reputation and is a visionary. So I want to go back to talking about that pathway to peak performance. We'll come back to the other stuff and kind of where you are and what you're doing. But along the way in life, there must have been points in time where you, beyond the pharmacy piece, where you were sort of like challenged. Is there some sort of like something that you can discern, like a protocol that you stepped into to figure out how do I actually get to that next step?
I had a lot of good mentors along the way, and not mentors like live here, in this world that I kind of study from and just look up to. And I think it was early on. I was telling somebody this story the other day was, you know, you finish school and you're done. It's like now you just go to work. And I tell pharmacy students all the time, like when they're graduating, I'm always messing with them. Like, oh, congratulations, now you can get to work the rest of your life. Like, good luck. I just like to mess with them. But I remember I was just sitting there scrolling on the couch a long, long time ago, and I come up on this ad that says the top CEOs in the world read 60 books a year. And I'm like, I'm read a single book this year, and it was an app. It was for an app where they do like book summaries. And so I got in there and I started reading some of the book summaries. And then I was like, well, this is really impactful. I'm going to actually read one of these books. And there was a time period in my life where I just started reading everything. I even took one of these, Jim Quick has this like how to read faster type thing. And I was just so excited at the fact that you get these people that they live their entire lives and then they want to do this thing, they make this impact and they write this book on a certain subject and they take their entire life's work, like all 20 to 30 years of like whatever they've been doing, and they put everything into this book, and then you can digest it in like 5 to 6 hours, like this in person's entire life. And so there was a time period where I was just reading everything. It's like, okay, what do I want to know? Like I'm not gonna be like the best pharmacist in the world. Like there isn't that thing. But, I read a book that said, hey, if you're the top 5% of a pharmacist and then you can learn marketing, it's like, I'll go learn marketing and I could be like maybe in the top 50% of marketing, but I'm in the top 20% of pharmacy. But if I combine that together, I'm a pharmacist that markets. Now I'm in the top 1% of pharmacists that market. And so I start learning all these cool concepts. I had these great mentors and I'm just reading every day. And I found that to be like just such an unlock for me for a few years. And just having these great mentors. And I think one of the things that really like unlocked it for me when it came to performance, because I just wanted to absorb as much information as I possibly could. And I know a lot of people say that they don't have time. You have kids, you have a job, you're on your way to work. I remember I stopped listening to the radio. I would just listen to like audibles. It's like, okay, I want to start another business. I need to learn how to market it. Well, I drive 40 minutes to work and 40 minutes back. It's an hour and a half every single day. I can get through a book a week. Like, how many books am I going to go through in 3 months? I don't know anything about marketing today, but in 3 months from now, I can know a couple things, And so I went through this period of my life where I was just absorbing tons and tons of information, and I kept on paying attention to very successful people. Like, what did they do? How did they think about the world? And I remember a lot of them would always talk about like meditation, and how impactful like clearing their mind out and meditating was. And I tried so hard for years, and I would get an app, I'd go to the park, I'd close my eyes, but my brain would go so fast. I couldn't understand how to do it. But everybody that I followed said it was just like this big unlock for them. And then one day I came across this guy, Joe Dispenza. He was saying something interesting, and I was reading like one of his books, or I was someone was mentioning him, and he had this meditation that you listen to, a guided meditation. And I was like, okay, let me try that. And it was this guided meditation that was basically, it was called like a morning meditation. And it was about having a vision of the future. And he would have this way of kind of like putting you in a trance where you can kind of separate from the world and get very like blank and just get very in tune with yourself. And then to visualize like a future that you wanted. And that was one of the biggest unlocks for me ever, because in those moments, I remember still sitting in my backyard, I would visualize the things that I wanted to do, the things that I was scared to do. I was very scared of public speaking, very scared, like almost would get sick, like my heart was beating through my chest. I was so scared to get up on stage, but I had this urge to one day speak and impact people. And I would picture that. I would picture having a company. I basically pictured all the things that I was doing through that meditation, and they all kind of came true. And I would say that it wasn't a daily routine, because I go through times where I'm on point. I'm eating the right things, I'm exercising the right way, I'm going to sleep at the right time. And I go through phases, ups and downs of that. Sometimes I'm traveling all the time and I can't stick to those things. But I would say that that visualization of like really knowing what you want to happen in the future, putting yourself in that future state, seeing what it feels like, understanding what mentality you need to have to do that, what you're not going to do, to make sure that nothing gets in the way of doing that. That was probably the biggest unlock for me. And when it comes to meditation, and I still struggle with it. I still go months and months without doing it. And it's a constant battle to get back to it. But when I want to do something very important, I make sure that I spend some quiet time away from the world, away from my phone, and really visualize, what I want to do in the future. And it's been the biggest unlock for me.
Yeah, the Joe Dispenza stuff is super interesting. And also that notion of the quantum field and getting into like the future self
Yeah.
and, saying thank you for and imagining that you're already there.
Yeah.
That visualization is so powerful. And I think that leads us to that flow state where you're sort of, there's two sides of it. First one is a personal flow state, and then there's an organizational flow state. You have a pretty successful company. And I'd love to know sort of like, how does your personal flow state, that point in time where you feel like, hey, everything is just, it's just, the watch is just working perfectly. Everything's in sync. There may be some problems that come up along the way, but it's sort of like, I got you, and we're moving you right into the flow state. And it's like, okay, pushing right through that. First of all, let's start with the personal flow state. You must have felt that at some point in time. Do you feel like that's something that you can tap into, or does it just happen sort of like spontaneously?
Yeah, I think I had some success in business. I did that discount card thing that I was talking about. I would just help everybody know that, hey, you can get your medications cheaper. And it was a successful business, and I was able to leave traditional pharmacy because of it. And then I was at this point where it's like, okay, now what do I want to do? I knew myself. I can be very obsessive. I wanted to pour myself into something that really mattered. And so I had to have this moment where I tried to tell myself, okay, make that decision right now and make sure it is. I think I got it from this book I read, The Infinite Game. I don't want to butcher the book, but I had to create a really good foundation that I could, when the world is crazy and I have 5 businesses and this is going on and everything's going wrong and then everything's going good, the madness of being an entrepreneur, I could always get back to this one fat foundation of why I'm doing everything. And I had my daughter at the time, and now I have 2 daughters. And I said, okay, what am I going to pour myself into? And I told myself, well, this whole world of like longevity and health and wellness and giving people more time and giving people more quality time is something that is complicated and something I can pour myself into. But more than that, what do I really want to do? And what I came up with, like in that moment, is that I just want to be a great example for my daughters. I want to go out there and live a certain type of life that helps, that they can like look up to. The way that I saw, my mom, how hard she worked, and my grandmother, how hard she worked, and how much they loved their family, and the impact that made on me. I wanted to do the next generation of that. Because generationally, the things are different. You're going to go work 15 hours and work 3 jobs so that we have everything that we need. Now, there's some good and some bad to that. Now, I realize that I don't want to work 15 hours, just to kind of make it by. I want to learn these other sets of skills that I can transfer to my daughters. And I realized, hey, if I can be healthy, if I can talk about all the right things, if I can be a good example of starting successful businesses and having good relationships, that I can prepare my daughters for the future, and I could be a good example for them. And that for me was like what I wanted to do in life. Okay, so it's like, okay, that is my foundation. That's what I'm doing. Okay, now I can go figure out how I'm going to go about doing that. And that's where that's where the flow state kind of began. It's the foundation. And anytime things get out of whack, I just remember why I'm doing it. Am I setting a good example?
You go back to the center.
I go back to that center because, yeah, I have one business idea one day and one business idea the next day. And sometimes things are going great. Some things aren't going great. And it's like, sometimes you realize, sometimes you're working harder and making less money than you ever had before. And so you have to sit back and think, well, like, why the hell am I even doing this? Like, what is the point? Is it money? Is it, and then I can just so easily go back, and it's like, oh yeah, I want to show them by example the things that I can do. I want to, I want to make a big impact. I want them to see. I don't want to talk about it. I want them to see me doing it, and this is why I'm doing it. And so I always get centered there, and that's like my foundation. I've never verbalized these things. I haven't. These aren't like, I don't do very many podcasts. These aren't like planned stories. This is like the first time that I've ever even like kind of shared these things before.
You know what's so great about that? It gives us an opportunity to get introspective and really take a look at, okay, well, what is going on for us and where are we headed? And I think that's phenomenal. And that center also feeds into your business And you can bring that example also translates to what you want to do in those businesses. It doesn't mean that you're going to have perfect employees or people that aren't going to do crazy stuff or whatever. But I'm curious now, as we move forward, you talked about Calm at conference. I think you had one recently, but there was one before that that I had heard about that was just like beyond, I mean, really pretty incredibly successful. What's been your experience like with that? Putting on like a conference, obviously you probably went to many along the way and part of others, but what's it been like bringing all those people together? And there's the lead up and the intensity of getting it all together.
Yeah.
And then at the end of it, what's the feeling like when you know that people have left there with so much knowledge, right?
Yeah, it's probably not healthy, but that first initial feeling is like, I can't wait to do it again. Like, what are we doing next year? You know, and a lot of people are telling me you need to take a day to, enjoy what happened and be happy for what just happened. But that process has been, you actually said it, is when I came into this world. I remember I went to my first longevity conference and my mind was blown. There's exhibitors everywhere. There's this whole entire other world of medicine. Like, what is this? And I wanted to learn everything. And I would take every certification course and I would go to every conference and I would go to every mastermind, and then eventually I became faculty member at certain institutions, and I would be the one speaking on stage, or I'd be the one creating the certification courses. And I got to one point where I said, hey, I want to create the conferences and the certification courses and the education and the training that I wish I had when I was going through that. Because, I went to everything, like every single certification course, every single mastermind, every single conference. Of course, like I told you before, I'm obsessive. But sometimes you go to a conference for a weekend and you sit there for 16 hours to get 2 tidbits of information. But if you know what I mean? Like you get like, you're sitting through like biochemistry. You don't even know why you're talking about what you're talking about, but there's 2 great things that you learned that weekend. And then you do it again the next weekend and the next weekend, and you go back home and you apply it and you start gaining all this experience. And after 6 years of doing that, religiously, everywhere you go, you accumulate all this knowledge. But I start to think about, hey, what about that one practitioner that it's coming in now? It's like, do they need to wait like 6, 10, 15, 20 years to get that knowledge? It's like, can I condense it? Can I create a conference that condenses all that actually doesn't just sit up there and try to impress them, and say, look how smart I am, that talks about, yes, like these are all the things this is where dysfunction happens, but hey, these are the solutions. This is how I'm doing it. These are the things that we run into. And can I bring in the people that have 20, 30 years of experience of doing this every day? And can I tell those people, hey, I want these lectures to be a little bit different. Do what you normally do, but at the end, give them something that they can go home and apply on Monday morning. Like, that's the type of conference I want to have. And I want them to leave the conference and I want them to be able to get on a one-on-one phone call with a clinical pharmacist and talk about it, because you can learn as much as you want on a conference on a weekend, but then you go home and you start to apply it. And you have certain case studies, you have certain issues. You need to be able to have a community where you can call someone up and talk about that thing. And so that for me was, I had gone to all the conferences, I'd done all the certification courses for everybody. And I saw all the best speakers out there and all the best clinicians that were actually doing it every day. And I started kind of putting them all together, kind of like this dream team of like, hey, these are the people that I learned the most from as I was coming up. Can I grab all these people and bring them together to create this kind of conference? And so that was the idea, but it was just an idea. Everybody's got a good idea and you have to actually go out there and execute it. And then when you're doing it, you're like, why in the world did I ever want to throw a conference? Like, when you're in the midst of it, which I'm going to be now in the next couple of months, you're like, why did I do this? But then there's that moment that you're talking about when it's all over and you see people that didn't know each other and all of a sudden they're connecting, and you see someone that's been learning from a lecturer for a long time and now all of a sudden they're talking, and you see companies that are coming together, and it's so exciting because that all those doctors are going to go home and make a huge impact on all these patients, right? Early on, I was helping doctors put protocols together and working more like kind of independently, and I had a collaborative practice where I was seeing patients, and that was super fun and super rewarding. But the impact that you can make when you can educate a number of providers and bring all the right people in the world, the impact is mind-boggling on when you have thousands of doctors out there that are now going to go make a positive impact on the thousands of patients, the tens of thousands of patients that they're seeing every day. That's what's just so freaking exciting.
Okay, so check this out. Take that feeling now, bring that back to the center.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, look at the impact that you're having, like, because you had an idea. And I think that's what one of the things we try to convey to people in this show is that, hey, have an idea. Find your pathway to peak performance. One of the things that's really clear in your pathway to peak performance, your ADD is a tremendous advantage for you. Your obsessiveness is a tremendous advantage for you. So in the past, we looked at those as deficits, but in reality, they're huge superpowers.
They're superpowers.
You're able to really dig in and look, you're processing through tons and tons of books. I think about sometimes, like, who are my mentors? Well, early on in my career, I read Think and Grow Rich.
Mhm.
In that book, he talks about having sort of like, your sort of imaginary mastermind, if you will. And then I selected all the people at that point in time that I thought were important. And I had that group and I could go have a conversation, like going into a boardroom
Yeah.
and actually have the conversation. And then I guess you could do that today with, Gemini or ChatGPT, right? Or you could actually assemble that and have that conversation.
Yeah.
Mine was imaginary in my mind where I was younger. But I think what's really amazing about you is that you have assimilated, you've absorbed so much information, you put it into something, you've ideated, and you've executed.
Yeah.
And then that execution has produced results that must provide you with tremendous satisfaction. What does it feel like to achieve that?
Maybe I don't stop to think about that enough because I'm just constantly thinking about, I guess, the next thing. And I think that's probably one of the things that I should probably focus on more is taking a deep breath and looking back to, what we've accomplished so far. But I just, I'm super excited and I'm super grateful. But I would say that even the success that we have now, one of the most like impactful, like what you're talking about, like how does that feel? Was when I created my first business and me and my wife were both working the night shift and we had our daughter and we were like passing each other by. It's like either you're home or I'm home. You're taking care of the kid or I'm taking care of the kid, but we're constantly working. And I was building something on the side. And then one day I was able to come home and say, you don't have to work anymore. You can stay home with our daughter. Still to this day, that was like one of the coolest feelings in the entire world. So that was so cool. I mean, even with all the success that we have now, I don't know, nothing was as cool as that,
Well, it's funny. The road to greatness is paved with sacrifice.
Yeah.
And to be cognizant of that and remember back to that moment in time and how much that meant to you, because it relates to your center.
Yeah.
Right? You were on a mission to make stuff happen and you did it. So, okay. It's so exciting to talk. I feel like this could be one of those 3-hour podcasts.
Yeah.
So maybe I always say to people, hey, you know what? The people that I really want to talk to ongoing, come back. Let's do, another one in the future. So Calm Conference, that's one part of what you're doing. So you've got New BioAge as a company.
Mm-hmm.
You guys have Progress Pharmacy. And then you've got something new. I don't know how new it is actually, but it's an assessment. Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah, sure. So what we were trying to do is create this entire ecosystem. I went to pharmacy school, so I have a lot of friends in the pharmacy world. So New BioAge is basically this clinical longevity ecosystem. And, Progress Pharmacy is one of the pharmacies in our ecosystems. There's other pharmacies that we use in our pharmacy network. But really what I'm trying to do is create this entire ecosystem to help medical providers deliver longevity medicine. And so to do that, you need first education, you need training, you need to understand what companies help you deliver that. Understand there's so many aspects to knowing more than, hey, you got to use this peptide or that peptide. So much more goes into delivering that for the patient. And so we try to create this entire ecosystem. And then one of the newer things that we have is called New HX. And it is a longevity assessment center where basically we do body composition scanning, metabolic breath analysis, and strength testing. One of the most fundamental or foundational things when it comes to longevity, your body composition, how strong you are, and your cardiorespiratory fitness. And it's a place where actually pharmacists run it. Pharmacist, it's not a traditional role. There's no drugs being dispensed there, but a pharmacist is running those tests and analyzing those tests and making recommendations for the people coming in. And so we partner with doctors that want to bring their patients over and get those types of assessments done.
So anybody can go there.
Anybody can go there. Yeah, it was in West Palm Beach, Florida, and you can go in there. We have a DEXA scan. We do strength testing, metabolic breath analysis, which means we can show you your VO2 max, your cardiorespiratory fitness, and we can start to have the conversation of Because this is the same thing that I teach doctors on, looking at things like visceral adiposity or looking at things like your VO2 max. There's a tons of literature showing us what this does to quality of life. And so there's so much data right there. Just from those key things alone, we can make recommendations that can change people.
Yeah, and you're pulling out of that, you're pulling out the pillars, right? Which are, hey, diet, exercise, sleep, stress. How do you manage those things properly to achieve the right outcome? But you got to get a baseline. And that's like for years. I mean, obviously I didn't do that. I didn't have it.
Yeah.
It's like it's the ability to get a baseline, to understand what you're really dealing with. And the earlier you get to it, and I think this is just my opinion, right? You're the expert, I'm not. But the earlier you get to that, the better off you are. So you've got that going on. You got Calm Conference going on. You got New BioAge. What else?
What else? I mean, that's what I'm mostly focused on when it comes to business wise, is I think that the future, when we talked about earlier, is going to be about medical practitioners and patients and consumers just being great at understanding and assessing risk. I don't know if assessing risk is more of like a medical terminology, not that you're at risk of something, but we now have the information to see the smallest biological shift in anything going the wrong way. So that not necessarily so you can take a drug or a peptide or hormones or anything like that. It's just so that you can say, hey, this is going in this direction. This is the type of nutrition. This is the type of exercise. These are the types of things that I can be thinking about and doing now to, eliminate that dysfunction.
It's crazy. So Christy Fury was in.
She's great.
Yeah, amazing. Like yeah, that's about amazing. What great things can't we say about her? She's the best. So she was in, and she was talking about Dr. Goodenow, and basically that in his education, he's like, hey, at this point in time, you can see where the cancer started.
Yeah.
Right. That notion of, and you guys have plasmologists in your mix, right? So I mean, that notion of being able to figure things out. By the way, I take your gut tides.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And thank you for putting those out. So does my business partner and his daughter, who has Crohn's disease.
Yeah.
So those are huge.
Yeah, that's it's in my backpack everywhere I go. It's like one thing I don't travel without. In case I make a bad decision on food I'm eating or anything that's going on, gut ties is like the emergency supply.
You got to have them. I mean, the gut microbiome is so important, right? Everybody's talking about it. Nobody really, I think there's a lot of misinformation there. So it's kind of interesting. I'd love to talk to you more about that at a later date. One thing I did want to cover is there are some real dangers right now in the market that I'm personally concerned with, and I know everyone else is as well. There are all of these research chemical companies that are out there that are putting out, well, you don't know where this stuff is coming from. You don't know what's in it. Talk about the dangers associated with that, because I'm personally really concerned with, number one, we touch on all the reasons why. You want to be working with a really qualified provider. Doesn't need to be a doctor. Chrissy Fury's as a nurse practitioner, but man, I'll tell you what doesn't she know?
Yeah.
It's really important that you're working with professionals before you start fooling around with what you just saw on YouTube.
Yeah.
You got to know what's going on. So let's talk about the dangers associated with that, and what don't people know about that?
There's so much there. It's a really weird time when it comes to the quality and the sourcing of a lot of these things. But yeah, I agree with you. Everybody should be working with a medical practitioner. It doesn't have to be a doctor. I know amazing nurse practitioners that if something's going on, even in my own family, I'm going to pick their brain about it. And tremendous nurse practitioners, physician assistants, naturopathic doctors that are excellent at this. But yeah, I think at baseline, obviously, everybody should be using a compounding pharmacy. I mean, every single one of those batches are sent away for stability, sterility. Every batch is tested. You don't know what you're getting from a research chemical site. And what's getting very dangerous right now is that a lot of, unfortunately, medical practitioners, I think, are being fooled, and it might be using research peptides that they don't even realize. Because it's just like the wild, wild west. There's a lot of sales reps out there. They say, hey, we're getting this from an FDA registered manufacturer. But it's an FDA registered manufacturer that's creating a research peptide, not for human consumption. Like, yes, they're registered, but it doesn't mean anything. It says for research purposes. It's not for human consumption. And so the FDA registered manufacturer is saying, hey, we're selling it to them. It says research on the bottle. We're good. Then this third party company is basically saying, hey, it's coming from an FDA registered manufacturer. And then, some medical practices and clinics are like, okay, so it's coming from an FDA registered manufacturer. It's like, no, this is for research purposes, not for human consumption. And it's just, I don't know if they don't have the knowledge or they don't have the time to double check, but every clinic should be getting their peptides from a compounding pharmacy.
See, this is the commitment that you've made to the industry. You get on an airplane to come out here to just film this show, right? That's a long trip.
Yeah.
But it's because you're committed to the industry and you want people to know. I was having a conversation with Frank the other day, just on the phone, and we were talking about the difference between food grade methylene blue
Oh yeah.
and methylene blue that is, what's the scientific version of
CGMP.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so people don't know. They think, oh, I'm just taking that methylene blue. This is going to work. This is going to improve my mitochondrial function and I'm going to get better ATP production and all this good stuff. But the reality is you just get a blue mouth, right?
Yeah, and I think that this should be monitored by a medical practitioner. There's a lot of things to think about. There's the marketing side of methylene blue and all the benefits, and anybody can put something into ChatGPT and read off of it and pretend like they're, an expert. But you need to have a medical provider that's taking a look at everything that's going on. Taking too much methylene blue could have a negative consequence, right? There's a very potent antioxidant. You can't over antioxidize the system. You can have consequences in the other direction. That this is something that should be monitored. It's not something that you should probably be on continuously. When it comes to, and even with the prescribing of peptides, as a pharmacist, I've been in retail pharmacy, I've been in hospital pharmacy. I do agree that peptides, they have the least side effect profile of anything that I've ever witnessed anywhere. But it doesn't mean that it's zero. Things still happen. There's people that shouldn't be taking NAD. There's people that shouldn't be taking growth hormone peptides. There's assessments that need to be made to make sure that this is happening safely. And when you were talking about, when it comes to data, when we were talking about the new HX side, which you were kind of getting to is longitudinal data. We don't just need an assessment at one point in time. We want to know how things are changing. Two patients that come in and have the same bone mineral density, 1 year later, somebody can have a completely different bone mineral density, right? So you're looking at the rate of change. Hey, what is accelerating in the wrong direction? And these two people, 6 months prior might have been the same, but something is completely different is happening in one of those patients. And so you need to have a medical practitioner that's looking at all these things, that's considering all these things, that is sourcing the appropriate peptide for you. So there's so much. We can go in a million different directions in this on this, but I do think the one big problem that I see in the longevity industry right now is that so many companies, telemedicine companies, diagnostic companies, supplement companies are trying to bypass the medical practitioner and go directly to the patient, and it's dangerous. I don't like marketing directly to the patient. I know that you have to, tell the services that you have that are available. You do need to educate the consumer. That's still something that I help doctors with that I think is important, but I made a decision a while ago is that I wanted to present information and present research and formulate supplements and formulate things and present that research over to a physician or a medical practitioner because they have the training, they have the know-how to make the right decision. It's very easy to fool patients with easy marketing and just claiming the benefits and pretending that side effects don't exist. With a physician is different. That's where I feel really comfortable. It's like, let me present all this research and information and present it over to them. And if they feel it is a good decision as well, then they can make those recommendations for the patients. That's where I feel very comfortable. But right now, the entire industry, even pharmaceutical companies, now you go directly to the pharmaceuticals website to get that one peptide. That's ridiculous, right? You can't get certain GLP-1s out of a regular retail pharmacy because they don't have it in stock. You have to go to the actual pharmaceutical company. They call it direct to patient. Pharmaceutical companies are just now, they have this new model where they're like, hey, forget everybody, forget the doctor, come to my telemedicine company, come to my website, and we'll give you this one peptide. Now, is that real longevity medicine? Should a patient say, hey, I think I want a GLP-1, let me go to that pharmaceutical company. Hey, I want something for my erectile dysfunction, let me go to that company. Does that make any sense? Is there a medical practitioner that's taking a look at the entire picture? Maybe this person has cardiovascular disease and that's why they need erectile dysfunction medication. Is the GLP-1 pharmaceutical company like doing that or asking those questions? Do they know the other drugs that the patients are getting? So I think this is a really big problem, and one of the things that I'm passionate about is let's put the medical practitioners at the forefront of this. And I'm not saying that other people can be involved in this. I think the best clinics in the world are medical practitioners that have an entire team. They have an exercise physiologist, they have a health coach, they have research. Some places even have research analysts that are working with them. Great customer experience people. But I think that it should be part of an entire team that's run by a medical practitioner. And I see the one danger I see is everybody's trying to kind of bypass them. And I'm trying to make sure that they're at the forefront of it.
Man, you just made the best case for this I've ever heard in my entire career, bar none.
Yeah.
Like that piece right there. We're just going to push that as much as we possibly can.
Yeah.
Because that is the truth. There is the truth of what you just said is so powerful. And when people tap into that and they understand, yeah, it costs more money to go the route, but the result, it's like, why would you, I mean, that notion of GLP-1 here, whatever, this, that, the other thing over here, and you're trying to piece it all together and you're using some sort of LLM to figure it out. That's insanity.
Right. And then you got, they're getting their lab work done at Function Health over here. And then they're getting this telemedicine company on this, they're going directly to the pharmaceutical company on the other one. And yeah, they're trying to put it all together. Everybody's giving you conflicting evidence. This company is saying, hey, my supplement's the best. Or they're saying, hey, no, this is what you need for better body composition. You don't need that thing. And it's like, they're battling for everybody's attention. There has to be something in the middle that's basically looking at that patient and saying, hey, what is the best thing for you?
Okay. I want to ask you a quick question. How does a everyday person who's now doing this sort of like hodgepodge approach, listening to this nonsense on YouTube, somebody espousing that they know this. I mean, you see there are a million of those guys out there, right? I'm all for free speech. But man, when some of this stuff is like, whoa, don't listen to that.
Yeah.
How does the everyday person who's interested in longevity medicine, health span, wants to live at their peak performance, how does somebody find that right practitioner? What's the criteria that somebody uses to actually get there?
That's a really great question, and one that we probably need to work on a little bit better. And one of the things that, because I focus so much on the medical provider and how they deliver longevity medicine, I think that this is an amazing question for us to spend, not even today, but spend more time trying to figure out how we answer that question. I think it's going to be a function of red flags. Right? Are they just selling you a protocol? Are they selling you very expensive lab tests, and then all of a sudden you go home with like $3,000 worth of supplements and a bunch of they're selling you the medications. They're not selling you their knowledge, their experience, access to their experience. It's things like that. Those are like the red flags. The red flags on, hey, this one compound is going to solve all your problems. So yeah, this is something that I think I need to spend a little bit more time thinking about, because the industry is so new, right? There isn't a guideline. There isn't a certain certification that's respected by anybody. There are no guidelines in this world, and so it's kind of the wild west, and it makes it really, really difficult for patients. But yeah, this is something that I think that I got to spend more time thinking about, because I really honestly don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah, we're a long way away from figuring out what color to paint the library, right? I mean, it is a land grab for many people out there right now. And, there are different categories of people. There are people that are just optimizers. I'm just going to try this. I'm going to see how it works. I'm going to do, whatever. And then there are people who are literally desperate.
Yeah.
We this full range, right? People who are desperate for whatever they can get their hands on.
Yeah.
And I think
I saw that recently with, we had a conference on COVID. I don't think people realize the impact that the spike protein and COVID had on longevity of patients, right? It's something that we weren't allowed to talk about for a long time. And so the medical practitioners that were in it and helping patients, they don't talk about it unless they're talking about to other people. And we're to a point where it's like, hey, we can go talk about these things and we can go talk about their experiences. And we started marketing this conference of how long, the impact of longevity on post-COVID, this post-COVID world that we're living on. There's accelerated aging happening, right, in this world. And people think it's just environmental, but the impact that COVID had, the spike protein had on our immune system, on our mitochondrial health, has made a big impact. And said, okay, let's have a conference about it. Let's bring in all the experts when it comes to long COVID, when it comes to mitochondrial function, when it comes to cardiovascular disease. And we started marketing this to the medical practitioners. So we wanted to have this kind of mastermind type event. And something happened that has never happened before, is that our inbox and our social media accounts started getting inundated by patients, which is not what we typically do, saying exactly what you're talking about is what I'm dealing with. Who do I go to? Where do I go? And it was this like very surreal moment where I was like, this is extremely important. And we got to make sure that medical providers know that there's patients out there suffering that maybe are afraid to speak up about, something that happened to them when it comes to this post-COVID fatigue, this long COVID that's affecting their lives, that it's affecting their immune system, that it's affecting their anxiety, their brain function. And it reminds me of what you were telling me about these people that are kind of like, they're looking for something. They need help, but the conversation just isn't happening out there.
Yeah, they don't know where to get the right information. You're onto it with what you're
Yeah.
doing with New HX, and I can only imagine that's going to really expand. I just get the sense that you're going to do all sorts of things with that. That's going to be super exciting.
Yeah, it's exciting. I have a lot of expectations or good ideas for it, because I do think this assessment part is going to become bigger and bigger. These diagnostics, like identifying risk on where it's at, is going to become bigger and bigger. Right now, the conversations around what hormone to take and what peptide to take and what supplements to take, and of course we'll talk about that, but you can't personalize solutions unless you can identify exactly what's personally going wrong or the dysfunctions happening in a patient. But something that you were kind of bringing up, of when I'm thinking about the medical practitioner, I'm thinking about how to help them deliver longevity medicine. But I also think about the medical practitioner and their health, because they're constantly thinking about other people.
Yeah.
And so what happens is that when somebody is very good at this, word of mouth spreads really quickly. And so then that medical practitioner gets overwhelmed because they have so many patients, and they can only see so many patients at a time. And so then a function of them scaling or making a bigger impact is how well they can teach other medical providers. And that's something that we are trying to help them with, or create an environment where they can bring their staff, they can bring other medical providers they bring into their practice to learn and get caught up to speed on what they're doing. And so I know that we've had some kind of good conversations on what you think about how that happens, much more efficiently. But I think that's a big thing to move the industry forward, is that clinic, that medical practitioner. It's like, this has happened to me before in the past. It's like the same set of skills that you have to get you to point A to B are not the same set of skills that you need to have to get from point B to C. Yeah, that medical practitioner is amazing at going and learning and seeing patients, and all of a sudden they're doing the amazing outcomes. They have great word of mouth, and then they expand, and then all of a sudden now they're kind of like in a rut because they can only see so many patients, and now they need a whole nother set of skills as to how to transfer that knowledge not only into their patients, but into other medical practitioners that are joining their practice. And so now they need a different set of skills. And how do we help those practitioners with the mindset around that, and with the educational tools, so that we're not all recreating the same thing? That's what I see happening in this world.
It's so cool, man. And just listening to you right now, and just what you just said, the reality is that there's a tremendous opportunity to do exactly what you want to do, which is that piece that you figured out that I think is so great. That notion of standing up on stage and talking a bunch of stuff and doing all these types of things that nobody can understand. Like, let's get down to the real brass tacks of this thing, and it's stuff that you can take home, take away. And that notion of being able to, if you're in that position as a provider, you're going to need, and you're running full steam, how could you possibly educate another provider to actually scale? And man, you know what? I just have so enjoyed this, and I really admire you, Leonard. You really, you just have an incredible drive, great vision, and you truly are a peak performer. Last thing I want to ask you is, somebody who's young and is trying to figure out what they want to do, what do you feel is one thing that you would say to somebody that helps them to understand how to find their pathway to peak performance?
Well, it's a pathway, right? So there's a path that needs to be taken. And at least for me, and it was, go and study the people that you want to be. You get to witness people out there. You get to witness their lives, what type of father they are, what type of husband they are, what type of business they do, what their daily life looks like, and find out what's exciting to you. Like, who do you want to be like, and go study those people that are doing it in a great way. And sometimes you have to study multiple different people. The same person that I'm learning biochemistry from, I'm definitely not learning other life skills from that person. Right? The same person that I'm learning medicine from, it's like, hey, they're great, but then it's like, I just take the best out of everybody. Take the best, that one husband and father that just that you want to be like and you look up to. Take the good from them and just go study the people, or at least the sections of their lives that you want to be like, and then make it your own. And that's what's been successful for me, is just I go and I study other successful people and take the best pieces out of it, and then put it together with what's important to me, my foundation that we talked about, and then you create your own pathway to peak performance.
Amazing. You came to that intuitively too. I mean, it's like, it was just, that's brilliant.
Yeah, this has been fun. This is you've given me, like, it's almost been like a therapy session of understanding myself a little bit better.
Well, you know what? That's a high compliment, man. And it's just a pleasure to spend time with you. And thank you for coming all the way from, West Palm Beach, Florida, to spend time with us. We're grateful for that. And, we wish you just the greatest success, and just so honored to have you here.
Thank you so much. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you. Hey, thanks everyone for watching the show. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps us out here at the channel, and share the video with someone who might be interested in supporting the charity that our guest mentioned in the episode. Thanks again. We'll see you soon.